don't do this too with your real estate? You don't look at people's windows and comment?
I do. I think this is funny that every week we start the show where people say, Roberto, where are you? I love your apartment. That is so beautiful. Roberto just uses this show to sell his apartment week after week. It's
one day. Someday.
All right, Roberto, what's your exact address?
Oh, no, we're not going to get into that.
All right. It's 4:02. And with that, we have to start the show where New York's #1 agent is like, where is that address? Because if anybody's going to sell Roberto Cabrera's apartment during the next 60 minutes, it's probably going to be Lisa Lippman.
It's probably going to be Lisa and Curtis together, co-broke.
Curtis Jackson, also no schlub to the business, has been what? Number one in his office, agent of the year, like 6 times. And it takes somebody like Lisa Lippman to make us just look ordinary, right, Curtis?
Well, you know, I am just so honored to be on a panel with Lisa because not only is she a friend, but she is an extraordinary broker. She's amazing. I hope everybody listening who's in the business gets a chance to do a deal with her.
Well, that's very sweet. And I mean, this is, you know, the mutual fan club here. But Curtis is, beside being an amazing broker, one of the kindest human beings that I've ever known. And no one will argue with that.
Oh, that's so sweet of you. Thank you. That's so kind. Thank you.
So I have to start with a correction because I put an email out to a couple thousand people, a couple million people, and immediately Lisa said, no, I didn't do $43 million and 10 deals since June. I've done a lot more than that. That is old news, John. So how busy are you, Lisa?
Well, so I'm busy. I'm really busy, but I want to say that, you know, I've been doing this for 23 years. So this is a very hard time in the market. And I don't want brokers who have been doing it for a shorter amount of time to be put off by me saying how busy I am. Because I'm not one of those people who always talks about how crazy it is and busy it is. I really try to be honest about stuff. And, you know, I was quiet when everybody else was quiet. And I was worried. And I was very worried about what 2020 was going to look like. And, you know, it ended okay. It was not the best year for sure. And now I'm busy. But what I do want to say is that, like, I've been doing it for a long time and I work like a dog. So during the shutdown, I was keeping up with everybody. I was keeping up with my listings. I was keeping up with buyers. When we reopened June 23rd, a lot of brokers I know were still out of the city saying, I'm not really working, this or that. In fact, I know a lot of brokers now who are like, I'm not really back in New York. Do you mind if I send my customer? I'm doing everything by, you know, by FaceTime or whatever. I never did any of that. Like, I came back June 23rd and I started working full time. So, you know.
But there's a lot of people on this call who say, wait a minute, I work 80 hours a week and I'm not that productive. And I know a lot of people and I'm social and I'm dedicated, but I mean, you're not, you know, you're working at a level way above, you know, the average broker, and you're raising 3 kids. So okay. You must be doing something really right on time management, not just working hard.
Okay. Well, so look, everybody has their weaknesses and their strengths. I'm a very good multitasker. I came into this business 23 years ago, sort of on a lark by accident. What I learned along the way is that multitasking is a very, very important part of this job. You can't get stuck in the weeds, because if you get stuck in the weeds, you're missing what just went past you. So if I would give a few easy words of advice to people, I would say, work really hard, get up early in the morning, listen to the people around you, pay attention to who's around you, and don't get stuck in the weeds, and learn to be a multitasker. And be friendly. Those are sort of like the touch points of being good at this. So I agree with you. There are people who work a lot of hours and don't get as much done or don't get as much accomplished. I think sometimes people get stuck on stuff and they don't, they just can't see what's around them. What I will tell you is if you work on all of those skills I just mentioned, and you do something that the manager of my office, Kevin Koveski, sort of coined, which is go through as many doors per week as possible, you will be busy and you will make a good living at this business. And what that means is, even if you don't have customers or listings, get out there, go to open houses, preview things. You must go through doors. And a friend of mine came to work at our company and had come from someplace else. And she was frustrated that she didn't have more business. And Kevin said to her, you know, how many doors a week do you go through? And she said, what do you mean? And he said, how many doors a week? And I don't mean your own door. And she said, you know, I don't know, I'll count. And she said, I don't know, 3, 4. And he's like, 3 or 4? Do you know how many doors Lisa goes through? He goes, I counted one. She goes through like 50 doors a week.
And those are just her exclusives.
So, and I'll tell you, my 26-year-old son just started working with me 2 weeks ago. And, you know, he's been watching me in action for I've been doing this 23 years. So since the poor thing was 3 years old. And, you know, he said to me, he's like amazed at just how much activity there is. And I said, you got to stay busy. You have to stay on your toes. You have to keep talking to people. You have to keep going through doors, because you don't know where you're going to meet people. And you don't know when you're going to meet somebody at a party who says to you, oh, you're a real estate broker. I have this dream about buying an apartment looking at the river with the terrace. And if you happen to go to an open house last week because you had nothing else to do, and you saw that apartment, and you can say to them, oh my gosh, I just saw this amazing apartment last week. Guess what? You just picked up a client. And even if they had another broker, they're going to be impressed that you did that. And they're going to tell their friend about you, because that has happened to me. Where somebody was just impressed, said, you know, I have my own broker. I'm not switching brokers. And, you know, and I don't push myself on somebody, but they don't forget that you knew something. So it's all about being out there and being friendly and listening to people and going through doors.
So Lisa, let me ask you something. You have a team. You have Scott. Who else? How is your team set up, and how many people is it?
So basically, Scott Moore has worked with me for 20 years. Which that might be the longest team in history of real estate. We should really check into that one time. And Mark Rodriguez has worked with me for 13 years, and he's 38 years old, so I feel like I raised him. And I have a new admin named Jessie Rodriguez, who, just for everybody to know the continuity, her older sister, Athena Bauza, worked for me for 6 years. Sure. And now my son just came to work with me. And I had the same driver for 14 years who unfortunately had to leave to go take care of his parents during COVID. So I just hired somebody new, but I've had a lot of continuity. And, you know, that's because I think we are a fun place to work. We never yell at each other. We take care of each other. I see myself as a fair boss. You know, basically it's my business. I bring in the business, but everybody helps me with everything. Scott likes to say that he makes sure there's gas in the car and I drive it.
And Curtis, how are you set up? Do you work by yourself? Do you work with somebody?
No, I've been working with a childhood friend, Adam Flax, for 12 years now. Adam came from NBC and Wall Street. And it's a beautiful relationship, similar to the environment that Lisa is saying. We don't push each other's buttons. We haven't had a fight in 12 years. Not that I'm a fighter, but it's a good match and a good team. And we each have our strengths. He supports me 100%. Since I've been in the business, many more years even than Lisa. I stopped saying how many years already, but let's say over 30 years. But I started very young, 23. And it's just worked out beautifully. I mean, it's just a very nice association. I've had people prior to Adam, but we're a small team, 2 people, and we can, we don't take more business than we feel we can really service properly. But I think it's been a real blessing and a gift for him to join me.
That's great. So let's talk business.
Sure.
What are you guys seeing? What's different now than, say, October, November?
You want to go, Curtis?
You can go, Lisa.
I think it's just people are waking up more. You know, obviously every situation is different. I like in this situation a little bit more to post 9/11 than to post 2008, 2009, because post 2008, 2009 was purely an economic crisis. And so everybody's hesitation was just about how much money they had, and when things would get better. You know, the situation we're now was everybody was freaked out. Suddenly people questioned their existence in a city. And so we had that plus the economic devastation. And so for me, you know, we technically opened in August, but, you know, September, October, November, people were slowly dipping their toes back in here. The tried and true New Yorkers, if they wanted to buy, were looking for really good deals. People who had been waiting on the sidelines outside of New York were nervous to come into New York for COVID reasons, but got a little bit interested if the prices were right. But there was a ton of trepidation. And like 9/11, I did deals right after 9/11, but the people who did those deals really, they had, you know, they had a lot of confidence and tenacity. I feel like in the last month or so, there's been some normalcy back where people who don't have the same tenacity are starting to just buy again and move around the city. They're not as nervous about COVID. I think they feel better about the city. I think we'll all agree that New York City proved itself to be the fabulous city that it is, that despite the fact that we live all so close to each other, people were so careful about masking and social distancing and cleanliness that I don't know if you all know out there, but Manhattan has the lowest COVID rate of any place within 100 miles. So it's an amazing thing if you think about it. And I think people realize that, like, you know, New York's a great place to live, that we can manage everything. And I think now with the vaccines coming, people really do see the light at the end of the tunnel, and people feel like it's a good time to take advantage of a market where maybe they have a little less competition and buy before things maybe get competitive again. And I'm starting to see some competition. I mean, I had a client looking at something on the Upper West Side for 2.1 million. And they said to me a few times, and they're buying virtually from London. They said to me, wow, this is priced so well. Why do you think it's priced so well? And I said, because they probably want to have a bidding war on it and sell it right away. And they're like, do you think so? Do you think so? And sure enough, we couldn't get back in for a second time. They accepted an offer and they sent a contract out. So, you know, New York's an amazing place, and we're starting to see that. We're starting to see the just the durability of our market.
Curtis, you see the same?
I do. You know, and it's interesting. I mean, everything at the moment, pricing is price. But we're really in a perfect storm where you have pent up demand, you have low interest rates, you have a strong stock market, and you have sellers who, let's say many, are more in tune and have become more negotiable, which I really feel is fueling the deals, certainly in the fourth quarter for myself personally, and then into the new year. Similar to what Lisa was saying, our last deal that we did, it had been on the market for quite some time on West End Avenue. Turnkey, it was overpriced, not our suggestion, and a classic of chasing the market down, but we finally got to the magic number, and we had three parties bidding. So it's such a price sensitive market. People are looking for value with a capital V. And if they perceive it as a value, at least in my personal experience, they're proceeding forward. And if they don't, they're moving on to the next seller and testing them. So, you know, if you get someone who's interested, I try to hold on tight at the moment if they're realistic in what their goals are as where we can get the property. But again, I think it's a perfect storm, and I think it's going to continue. Again, am I concerned after yesterday of the most fatalities since COVID started? Of course. But with Lisa saying that New Yorkers have really taken this, have been so vigilant that maybe we're not going to have, I think people still in the back of their mind, you know, could there possibly be another lockdown? Hoping that obviously doesn't take place. But I feel that the momentum from the fourth quarter is going into the new year, and hopefully will continue.
I do as well. I think that there was a lot of people leaving the city, but not necessarily leaving the city permanently. They were leaving the city temporarily. Some going to a separate home, some adding a separate home, but not necessarily selling the home that they had here in the city, where it sat vacant. And now some people left the city to sign a 1-year lease. Those things are all going to come due, and they're all going to start to slowly trickle back. I have this personal opinion, and I've been saying it for a long time, that I feel that come spring and summer, it's going to be extraordinarily busy because people are going to try to be getting themselves back into place for the following school year. Because by then there's going to be a tremendous level of comfort, and people are, and it's just going to, I think it's going to be extremely competitive. I think the other thing that's happening, which is interesting about what Lisa said, is that there have been very few to no foreign buyers in our marketplace. This has all been purely driven by domestic activity. Mm-hmm. The moment and the only foreign deals I'm hearing about are literally sight unseen. It's FaceTime, mm-hmm. and it's literally, I think I've heard of 2 deals and that was it. Once that starts to change, the demand is going to change tremendously.
Agreed. I mean, one of the things I want to say about, people leaving the city is I'm kind of a diehard New Yorker. And John, I grew up outside of New Haven. So I know Connecticut well. And we actually have a house up in Kent, which we spent most of quarantine time up there. But I'm a diehard New Yorker. One of my favorite parts about New York is that everything's open Sunday night and there's people around and you can't tell it's Sunday. Because I used to just get depressed in the suburbs on Sundays, that all I had to do was my homework and nothing was open. It just bummed me out. So that's me. I like the fact that I'm hearing, I don't want to say sirens, but I don't mind the noise in the background and all that. So, when there was a lot of noise about people leaving, what I thought and said, and I think it's turned out to be true, is that most of the people who left were on the fence before about leaving. So I saw a lot of families like up to 40 years old with 1 or 2 little kids who had been kind of figuring out what they could get for $3 million, between 2 and 4, let's say, in an apartment, figuring out the private school thing. And there was always a part of them that was like, is this just too hard? Think of what we could buy in the suburbs. They went to the suburbs for quarantine to stay with a family member or whatever, rent a house. And suddenly they were like, wow, we have a yard and there's public school and this is so easy. And those people decided to leave. A lot of them were on the fence. And, interestingly, this week I pitched two listings, 2 expensive listings, both over $6 million, of people a little older than that, in their early 40s, with kids between 5 and 12, both looking to sell. And I spoke to both of them. They both want to go to the suburbs. And I said, is this a COVID thing? And they said, no, we were thinking our boys needed a sports school and a backyard. And the other one said, I never wanted to live here anyway. My husband wanted to, which is why we bought a duplex, but I really always wanted to be in the suburbs. So again, it was in my mind kind of the person who was always on the fence, and this was maybe the kick in the butt. So I agree with Roberto. And, then I'll just tell quickly, I had 2 other clients who did leave the city, went to their very nice country houses someplace else, signed their kids up for school in that other place. And in January, I got calls from both of them saying, what's the city like? We need to come back. We can't stand it here anymore during the winter. So I think that there were some people that, look, there's always going to be people who want to live in the suburbs. The suburbs are beautiful. But I don't think we're going to see that urban exodus that we were afraid of.
I agree. I mean, I've only lost 1 client that ended up packing up early on and moving to their home in the Hamptons full time. The rest, we have several clients who are either renting or living in their second homes out of the city, but 3 of them do plan to buy something again in New York this year. So I think it's overblown as to the exodus, at least in my personal experience.
I lost one very
watching the 4 of you. Lisa goes upstate Connecticut. Curtis, when he leaves on the weekend, he goes to Vermont, Roberto, he goes out to Southampton. And often when I talk to Roberto in the last 6 months, I say, where are you right now? Oh, I'm working out of Southampton. And so a lot of those New Yorkers, like all four of you, already had had a summer place, had a weekend place that you could go to. And you just used it more intensely over the last year. Sitting here in Connecticut, and I'm trying to understand what is the profile of New Yorkers coming out. And I agree somewhat with Lisa that I can count on my 30-year-olds and my 40-year-olds who are starting families and young families who are looking out here maybe to move their kids into communities with good schools. But that doesn't explain the phenomenal lift in the Connecticut market, in the New Jersey market, in the Westchester market, across all of these markets. It's not just the towns with premium schools that did well. All 16 towns did well. And it wasn't just 4 acre zone that did well. It was places for $700,000 or $500,000, and it was quarter acre lots as well. So we've seen a lift not only from people moving out full time, but we've also seen second home. What are the other things driving, I guess, the demand we're seeing in the suburbs from New Yorkers?
So I would say that I think that I saw some people make the decision to not buy a bigger place in Manhattan, stay where they were, and use that money to buy a second home. So I think that the second home market, I mean, I will tell you in Kent, it was crazy this year, right? The broker I have up there had the nerve to say to me when I said something about looking for a house for me if we wanted to upgrade, I don't really have time for you. I've sold enough this year that I don't have to work anymore. I thought, wow. But I think that that's part of it. I heard some people say, let's say they're in a $3 million place here and they were going to upgrade to a $5 million. They said, you know what? We're not going to do that. We're going to now go buy a place someplace else for $1.5 million because we want to have that getaway should this kind of thing ever happen again or whatever. So I think you saw some of that. I mean, John, I don't want to say that we didn't lose anybody. We did lose people. We lost people who potentially would have bought a $3 million apartment in the city and decided to go to the suburbs instead because, so if they were sitting on the fence 2 years ago, the fence would have gone city. And this year, the fence went suburban. And if you looked at the gross numbers, we probably had more people go suburban than we did 2 years ago. So I think you're seeing that too. And I also think, what we're not talking about, but I felt this year because I did some rentals this year, is that the rental market got very, very soft. Yes. So I think that there were a lot of people who for a while were sort of renting something for $6,000 to $8,000 a month. And they were very happy doing it and suddenly felt like this is a lot of money. Let's go buy a house for $1 million someplace. So you're talking about the lower priced houses. I think some of those people who were sort of perpetual renters and suddenly were feeling very claustrophobic in their apartment and couldn't really afford to buy something in New York, but were okay living that way because there are New Yorkers who live like that for a long time, but suddenly that was not palatable anymore. So I think you got some of those too.
Do you not think the velocity outward, like towards John's neighborhoods, and that it's going to really start to moderate? Because it really spiked. It's got to be, I have to believe that it's moderating. Not that your market won't continue to be competitive, but the extreme nature of it has to moderate.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think whoever has decided who is going to make the move, many of them have already done that. And I think those who are diehard New Yorkers like Lisa and myself and others, I think if they're not back yet, they're coming back. And again, I have 3 in mind that I'm thinking of who I know are coming back, and they'll just keep, 2 are renting, 1 has a home, but they're all going to be buying again in the city this year. So that's a very good sign.
Look, I see all of this as musical chairs, right? In the end, it's all musical chairs. So one of the things that is hurting in our market in New York is that there's been overbuilding, period. You know, I had spoken to a broker a couple years ago who does mainly new development, and we were talking about all the new buildings in one neighborhood. And I said, but who's going to live there? And he said, well, what difference does it make? And I said, well, of course it makes a difference. Like, you don't want to have empty buildings. And if you were to fill all those buildings, imagine how crowded the neighborhood would get. So the fact is COVID or not, we overbuilt. We built more homes than there are people who are, as my 15-year-old would say, well, Mom, if there were low-income housing, we could fill them all. He's right. We built more homes that are expensive than we have people. But that's pre-COVID. So now we have a game of musical chairs, right? So the other question to you, John, is all of those people who sold their homes, all the people who came to the burbs to buy these homes and your market went crazy, well, where'd those people go who sold them? Because you see, I think some of them probably downsized or upsized in your neighborhood, but some of them also now are able to come to New York. Because I'm 56 years old, and when my kids were 2 and 3 years old, I had a lot of friends move to the suburbs. And they all said, hey, we'll be back in 20 years. And now a lot of them found themselves not able to sell their houses in the last 2 or 3 years, or were selling them for a lot less than they thought. And what they could buy in New York really was like very disappointing. And suddenly in this last 8 or 10 months, the math probably started making sense again. So I do think we're going to have some musical chairs there.
I totally agree. I'm going to dispute Roberto's assertion that we're at the end of this wave, because we've only got 90 houses for sale in New Canaan, down from what ought to be 160 at this time of the year, and rising to a peak a couple years ago of 350. So in a town that is used to seeing 350 choices to now only have 88 or 90 choices, I don't have enough inventory in Connecticut to even satisfy the second home needs of the people on your block. I mean, our market is so tiny that when New Yorkers get an idea that they'll go look out in Connecticut, we only have a handful of a little bit of inventory. I don't see that changing this year or next year. I see this, I mean, maybe the euphoria, maybe the bidding wars will go away, but I do think that the values in Connecticut have been low for 20 years. And I think that now we're just starting to see people are waking up to that fact. And they're saying a second home is extraordinarily affordable. And when Curtis, at the beginning of the call, I showed him a beautiful house on 4 acres. And the first thing he asked me was, what are the taxes on that? And I said, $2,000 a month. And he said, wow, really? I could live in New Canaan and put my kids to school in a beautiful school system for free. And the cost is $2,000 a month.
Sunday night, nothing's open.
I was going to say, what are you going to do Sunday night?
We all have Netflix. It's fun.
We're New Yorkers.
I mean, Curtis, Roberto, and I, we want to like meet on Columbus Avenue and have margaritas under a heater.
We have margaritas. We have beers. We don't have any discotheques in New Canaan. We don't have any tattoo parlors. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Tattoo artists. We don't have that. We have margaritas and we have heat lamps. And we don't really have any discos.
So let me ask you guys about something. How about investor purchases? Investor purchases right now are do not sketch out. They're not calculating. And I'm wondering how that's different for John.
Investor purchases?
Yeah, people who want to get the income, because here nothing is penciling out.
That was true. I had many people say, I'd like to buy some rental properties, and what are the rentals getting? And the rentals were not supporting the purchase price. That's changed because we've, in the last year, I don't know if it's going to sustain, but the rental rates have gone up quite a bit, and they're now supporting. I had an agent in this office say she was putting a house on for $500,000 this week in Reading that had a rental history of $5,000 a month. You can afford to buy that and rent it out for $5,000 a month until such time as one day you want to use it. I have a high school friend who bought a house in New Canaan years ago for $800,000, 2 flat acres with a mid-century modern. It's got a pool, it's got a river, $800,000. He's been renting it out for 15 years. And he came to me this week and he said, it's been a terrible investment for him. Owning a house in Connecticut and renting it out, at least until, it has been a bad investment. He's probably got the original 800,000 into it. I think he's only been getting $6,000 a month.
So here, the calculus used to be more or less, a handful of years ago, it was like, if you put 40% down, you could pretty much break even. That was kind of the calculus. Now I have someone from London and someone else, and they want to put their money, they want to buy something, they feel that the value is good. The calculations, it's like they have to put like 80% down in order to, in some of these cases, for things that are within their price range, they're around $1 million purchase. Just doesn't calculate for the rent they're going to get.
Right.
No, plus they can make so much money. They can make a lot more money in the market right now. That's the other problem. Yeah, what I've seen in investment properties is really the only way to make money in real estate anymore is obviously if you bought it a long time ago, so you have very low basis, or if you buy multifamily in middle class neighborhoods. I actually think that's the only way to do it. And it's very specific and you have to be very knowledgeable. And you also have to buy many of them and have very good people who take care of your buildings at reasonable cost. It's sort of the only way to do it. You really have to scale it.
Agree with you. Yeah.
So working with an investor, it's difficult. It's a complicated, it really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Where there's good money is buying houses. Again, you have to figure out your way to do it, is buying houses in college towns and fixing them up and renting to them to rich college kids who live in those houses. That is where good money is. And there are places to do that. But again, you have to be able to go and take care of the houses and you have to do it to scale. But that's really where the money is in real estate investing now.
That's what I did 2 years ago. And fortunately, it's been working out nicely. I did in a college town up in Vermont.
What kind of return? Let's get disciplined about this conversation. What kind of a return are we talking about? I have an investor in New Canaan who's been buying up all the condos he can. He's up to 22 condos in New Canaan. He spent an average of $300,000 a piece. He rents them out for $2,000, $2,200 a piece. I did the math and I said, yeah, he's making on an unleveraged basis, he's probably making 8% to 12%, depending on how well he buys these condos. 8%, you could make a living. 12% is pretty good. Now we're starting to see price appreciation on those. If any of the agents in Connecticut, these are the Heritage Hill condos in New Canaan, considered the bottom of the New Canaan market, $300,000. For an 8 to 12%, I don't think I can buy, tell me if I'm wrong, but I can't buy $1 million apartment in New York and get an 8% return on renting it out, can I?
No way.
No way.
So what kind of return can I expect in New York? Because what I'm hearing is that prices haven't gone down. I've heard from many of you on this show week after week, the prices have really only gone down maybe 8%, 10% for the most part, with a few exceptions. So prices haven't gone down enough to make it a sexy investment. Is that right?
Yeah, and then the rental market is so challenged at the moment. So it's a really tough sell at this time.
It would have to be a price appreciation long-term.
Right.
Yeah. In my mind, the best neighborhoods have gone down 10 to 20%. It's not 8%, it's more. From the height of 2015, it's down 10 to 20%. From just pre-COVID, it's 8 to 10%. But the rents have gone down that much too, easily. So I think,
yes.
I think that Roberto's right. If you're looking at price appreciation, like I had a call this morning from a guy from Pakistan who wants to spend $4 to $5 million on an investment property. But when he meant an investment property, He's not going to rent it out. He wants to park money in it. Maybe they'll use it when they come into town once or twice a year, but he's hoping to be able to sell it for 50% more in 5 years.
So what sort of options did you give him? Just curious, like.
So, basically we talked about neighborhoods. He said, well, how about the neighborhoods that are down 30%? I said, you're not going to buy neighborhoods that are down 30% because they're down 30% for a reason. They're not going to come back up either, So what I would say is you want to buy the good neighborhoods. You want to buy, for him, condo product that's been sitting on the market and has chased the market down so that it's down 25% where maybe it should only be down 15%. But maybe with a little bit of fixing up or something, it should appreciate more. And I always tell people, if they're looking for really good value right now, don't go for the stuff that just came on the market. Look at the stuff that's been on the market for 400 days, that started at a ridiculous price and now may be priced under market. That is how you get good deals. And there's plenty of them out there right now.
Yeah, for sure. And the new development situation is the same. Their new developments are averaging probably 20. I spoke to Shlomi. Shlomi gave me it was 20 to 25% off.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that stuff, there's too much of it. Yeah. And a lot of it came on at very high numbers. I mean, I don't understand what happened when 2 or 3 years ago, developers started saying, well, it's only 2,500 a square foot. That's such a good deal. And it's like, well, yeah, if you have a park view, but it's not a good deal if you're looking at another building, So somehow things got very skewed. And, one of the things I'm a little worried about, and Curtis and I talked about this last night, is that, developers often lead the pack in getting too greedy. And one of the things I'm worried about now is as the market's heating up, and, now there was just an article saying that, this is going to be an amazing year for real estate, is that the developers are suddenly going to raise their prices or come on at high prices, and that will stop our recovery.
Without a doubt.
Because, you guys have an MLS system. We have Street Easy, which really changed everything in this city. So there used to be this lack of transparency. Now everything's so transparent that every buyer is an expert. So if you put something on at a ridiculous price and 2 years later it's still available, people now think there's something wrong with it. And I have to tell buyers, no, it's just that it came on at 50% too much, but it kills the values of everything when you do that.
But new development needs a lot more transparency still. If they had more transparency, it would actually give people a certain sense of certainty of where things can trade, and more trades would happen. They would be helping themselves. And
1,000%. 1,000%. I totally agree. Like, don't negotiate 25% off your price. Take 15% off your asking price. Yeah. Do it right away. It's the biggest. I've done a good amount of new development. And every time I tell a developer, I said, don't leave so much room for negotiation. You're killing yourself. It makes your product look overpriced and silly, and it's bad for everything.
Yeah. Have you been able to get a lot of concessions in your new development?
I only have one new development deal brewing right now, and it's, of course, a very hot building.
Yes. Nice.
So no, but
right.
There's a lot of buildings giving a lot of concessions.
Mm-hmm. No, I was with an appraiser this morning, and he's saying a lot of the sponsors are giving, in many cases, many concessions.
The thing they have to worry about, and this is an interesting thing, I don't know if you guys have seen it, is a few years ago, I represented an Extel building, an apartment in an Extel building, because they sometimes give listings out to different brokers. And I had a guy come and he said he wanted 8% closing costs, given back at closing. So he was willing to pay more than the asking price if he could get 8% back. And, so I go to the sponsor and I say, look, that's very good for your closed costs. He's like, I'm not doing it. It's illegal. That's bank fraud. And I thought, wow, you're right. But I never heard anybody say that. And they were like, absolutely not. We will not give you more than 3 or 4% off. That's what closing costs cost. They're not more than that. And anything beyond that is bank fraud. So, look, I think Extel is a great developer, but I am worried that developers will do that too much because, again, that messes up comps. It makes things, then nobody trusts anything. And in the end, it is bank fraud.
I would have hung up on him right away.
So one of the things I'm learning is that you began the hour by saying you got to go through a lot of doors. You got to be personable and nice, and you got to be connected. But what I'm learning is that you talk very specifically about numbers and what things are trading for. You have a command of the market. You've not only seen all these apartments and been through the doors, but you're able to talk with great facility on what is the, what are things trading for? What are the discounts being offered? Where do you get your information? Are you on the phone talking to people all the time? And how has that shifted as the New York market has gone from trying to find listings to now trying to find scarce buyers? How do you get your information, and how do you get your buyers?
Well,
Doors.
I'm on the phone a lot. I'm reaching out since I've been in the business many, many years and know a lot of brokers in the business. I'm reaching out to try to find out what is this apartment in contract for now, because that's really where we want, immediate data now, things that are happening, not what is in contract 6 months ago, what's in contract in the last month. So most brokers I find are being more willing to share information, where in the past, I'll tell you once we have board approval. I'm an open book. I really feel that we really need to help our fellow brokers.
Makes me more valuable than Street Easy, and makes me more valuable than Zillow. If all my customers all think they're as smart as I am because they have access to Zillow and Street Easy, you're right. Then what are we doing? So we have to get on the phone and get fresher information, fresher priced information, and the kind of detail that Lisa's talking about when she talks to developers on what are things trading for now.
Exactly. I mean, I met this appraiser this morning. I called a broker, has another apartment in the same building in contract. It was very helpful to validate our price. The broker was very helpful. I've helped her in the past. So it's short-sighted if you're not willing to share with your fellow brokers. And I'm sure Lisa would agree with that we really have to help each other out, especially in times like this. Most of my business is, having done this a lifetime, is repeat and referral business. That's really, I'd say at this point, 95% of my business. Having nurtured relationships for decades, having sold the parents and all the children, which is extremely gratifying. But that's I really
all about social media. You mean you're not a social media darling?
I am not.
You're not getting your customers from TikTok?
He's going to be.
Although I think I would enjoy doing TikTok, but it's basically from staying in touch, really nurturing the relationships, calling, texting, notes, gifts to the newborns, the grandchildren, the children. That's been my way of building my base, and it has served me well over the years.
One of the things, John, I'll say in answer to your question too, is that it goes back to the multitasking. I think what makes this job fun is there's lots of facets of it, right? So there's the showing the properties, there's giving advice on staging and getting a property ready. There's getting along with people, the psychology of how couples relate to each other, walking people through the process, and then there's the business, the numbers parts of it. And, I'm going to go back to the doors again, only because it's all about having seen things and being places and paying attention. Because, I have a listing now, and a broker called me and her client made a very low offer. And I said, first of all, it's ridiculously low. Second of all, the board will reject it. And the apartment's worth more money. And she said, well, how do you know that? And I said, because I know. She goes, well, I'm all over the city. I can't possibly know what the comps are for this kind of apartment. And so I didn't say anything to her because I thought, well, that's the most asinine thing I've ever heard. But I didn't say it. But today she pushed me on it again. And I said, well, how about the apartment I sold just a few floors up? She goes, oh, well, I didn't know about that one. And I wanted to say, well, like that's on Street Easy. But the point is, it's like the opposite of what Curtis said. Like if you have a client who's bidding low on an apartment, well, give them advice. No, but know what you're talking about when you say to them, like, you know, geez, I got to tell you something. I think it's too low for that apartment. Look what else has sold. And clearly she's not able to do it because she's admitting she doesn't know. So, you know, people trust you when you know things and when you have real data to back it up. And one of the ways I often get new business, I get buyers or sellers, you ask me, is that I'll say to somebody like, I know what the competition looked like. I can tell you that that was worth X because I saw that apartment. I didn't see it on Street Easy. I actually was in that apartment, or I sold that apartment. And sellers and buyers trust you when you have that firsthand knowledge. And as to your point, it makes us relevant.
How do you get that trust? That is the key to the whole thing. You have all this knowledge. She knows that she doesn't have the knowledge. You tell her you're not bidding enough, and she needs to trust you in order to get there. And she just met you. That's the magic. How do you do that?
Well, I mean, I think, this woman was a broker on the other side. She's not going to trust me because just trust me. She's the type who doesn't trust anybody, but that's fine. You know, I think that you don't push it down their throat. I think sometimes it's time. I mean, I have a buyer now who's looking to spend $14 million. And, you know, people say, oh, that's so great. You have a $14 million buyer. You know how long I've been dragging him around? For 6 years. For 6 years, I've been telling him the value of things, and I've been giving him good advice, and I haven't pushed him when he wasn't ready to buy. So some of this is patience.
Without a doubt. Agree 100%.
And, you know, years ago when I first went into the business, I'll never forget that they taught me in my training program. It was not at Brown Harris, it was another firm. They said, you know, you have to qualify people. Before you take them to see apartments, you have to ask them how much money they have and how much money they have in their bank and how much they earn and how much debt they have. And, you know, I was a lawyer before this, and I came from a family, like, we're Jewish, but we were like wasps. Like, we didn't talk about money, okay? No one knew how much money anybody had, and you didn't talk about how much money you had. So I remember, like, my skin started crawling. I'm like, oh my God, I can't ask somebody how much money they have. So I remember then I started teaching classes, and I would say, do not ask people how much money they have. Get to know the person. Ask them what they're looking to spend. Take them out to see properties. Eventually, you will figure out how much money they have. You have to get to know the person. They have to trust you. And you know what? It either comes out verbally or it comes out in other ways, and you figure it out.
Yes.
Yes. You know what's interesting? In mid-2000s, when inventory wasn't what it is today, one of the top brokers in our industry, I'll tell you who it is later, but their voicemail, if you called up and said, if you're calling about any of our listings, please let us know, please tell us the name of your client, what they do, what their approximate net worth is, and we'll call. I mean, that was their voicemail. It was extraordinary. Wow.
A little off-putting.
A little.
I think it's so important to hear that from a successful agent like Lisa, from Curtis, because I perceive that anybody who did 10 deals or more than 10 deals in the last few months, a very challenging environment, is not exhibiting patience. So for you to say at the very highest levels, slow down, you cannot push these people, you cannot impart a sense of urgency that maybe doesn't exist for them, that maybe exists for you because, you know, you've been dragging them around for 16 years and you're wondering, when does this end? I think it's so important for us to hear that at the very highest levels, we still have to exhibit patience, that you still can't push them faster than they want to be pushed.
No.
I think something very important to tell somebody, and I often tell this to a buyer, because, you know, sometimes a buyer will be like, oh, I hope you don't mind. I'm taking a long time looking at apartments, or I've looked at a lot. I always say, you know what? It's your money. It's not my money. I'm going to give you advice. I'm going to tell you what I think something's worth. I'm going to be honest. I may tell you sometimes not to buy something. I may tell you sometimes I think you should bid higher. In the end, it's your money. And I'm never going to tell you what you need to do. You have to want to do it. And I think if you say something like that to somebody and you look in their eye, they believe you because it's an honest thing to say. And I think you're right. I think patience is, I should have added that in the beginning. It's extremely important, extremely.
Yes.
Not my strong suit.
Can we talk about
Call me the next time you're feeling impatient, and I'll walk you through just calming down and giving the person space, and it'll come.
Can we talk about one sector of the market, which I see Scott Hobbs joined us. I don't, Lisa and Curtis, I don't know if you know Scott. Scott's an extraordinary builder who works in Connecticut, the Hamptons, the city, New Jersey, everywhere.
Nice to meet you.
Hello, good afternoon.
You have a pretty, I think you have a pretty kitchen there, I can see.
It's his office.
That's his office? Oh, all right. It's a small little box. Sorry, can't tell.
You should see what Scott builds. It's incredible. But so the apartments, especially family-sized apartments, the larger apartments that people have spent a generation in, and all the apartments along Central Park West, Park Avenue, Fifth Avenue, the majority need a tremendous amount of work. Apartments that need work, even pre-COVID, were suffering tremendously. You just couldn't sell it. If it needed work, you couldn't sell it. And then COVID came and all of the renovations got shut down. So that made it more extreme. People just didn't want to touch anything. Now, if something gets shut down, it'll likely be for a short period of time. So I think that's probably going away. But are you guys seeing, and Scott, are you seeing more people buying things in Manhattan that need work? Are people calling you about, look, I've got an extraordinary, 8-room that needs complete gut renovation. Are you getting calls right now?
We actually are getting calls, which is very encouraging. So, I mean, I would say that it's a long way from being frothy in the construction side of things, but construction follows transactions. And so as the transactions have been picking up, I would expect that we end up seeing more construction calls in the near future.
And Lisa and Curtis, are you guys getting more activity on things that through buyers or sellers that need on apartments that, they need to spend $2 or $3 million?
Well, I'm dealing with a smaller estate sale, not in that needs that kind of work, but we are getting pushed back. But again, it's all about the price. If the price comes down to a level that warrants whatever amount of money you need to put into it that makes sense to the market, then I think people are willing to take it on. But it all comes down to, in fact, I just had a reduction on a estate sale today, and 2 people who've been circling got back to them just before we went on this webinar today. And I'm expecting to hear back to them because they both said, you know what, we like the space, we're willing to take the project on. Let us know if the price is reduced. So the estate was resistant. They finally today, they reduced it. It's a significant amount in relation to the price point. And I think one of these parties will come to the table. So I think it's all about price. Not to say that people aren't concerned about a potential, maybe another lockdown and they'll get caught midstream in a renovation. But I think more if the price is attractive enough, people are going to take the project on.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that too. I'll tell you, in a go-go market, whether it was 2005 to 7 or 2013 to 16, a lot of people bought Recs because that's all they could buy because everything else was going really quickly. And a lot of those people got suckered in to paying more than they should for a rec because in general, and I'm sure Scott, you agree with this, generally things cost more to renovate than they think they're going to. And in New York, that's especially true because we've got so much permitting issues and timing, in a building a certain time in the morning, out by a certain time of day, penalties after a certain amount of days, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of people who, if they bought Recs at a high price, get hurt if they try to sell them before the market's really frothy again.
Dealing with that now.
Right. And it's very hard. I think a lot of people heard those stories, and because of all the things that Curtis said, afraid of lockdowns again or delays, people are willing to buy them, but now they are factoring in the fact that it will take a year to renovate, that they have to live someplace else, that the money they've spent on it could be working in the market and it's not, that the renovation is cash and can't be financed. And the values, it really just affects pricing. I'll give you a great example. I represent the sponsor at the Apthorpe, which is a beautiful turn of the century building at 79th and Broadway. And they're probably some of the most beautiful apartments in Manhattan. It's, looks like the PT Palace. We can't recreate that kind of architecture. But the apartments are complete wrecks. That's how we sell them. And the renovations in that building are $800 to $1,000 a square foot. There's just no way to do it for less because they're very thick walls and there's asbestos abatement that needs to be done and the windows are mahogany and need to be replaced. And so the people who can buy those apartments are very wealthy because the apartments are expensive, the renovations are expensive, and they have to be able to pay cash for all the renovations and live someplace else. So your buyer pool is much smaller. So as Curtis says, we just have to lower the prices on those apartments because they're also inhabitable. You know, sometimes people buy something that needs work and they think, oh, I'll live in it for a while. But some of these really old grand wrecks, you know, there's nothing you can do with them. So it's so much about pricing.
Yeah.
I think that the suburban market, tell me if I'm wrong, Scott, but you've got clients in the suburbs and in the city. I think that those barriers to renovation in the city right now are favoring new development in the city. And a lot of those people who are looking for a project are more apt to do a project in the suburbs. Is that true? Or are you seeing equal interest in doing projects city and country?
I mean, I'd say right now in the suburbs is much more busy on the construction end of things than the city. But I think that there was a gap there also where, I mean, New York was shut down for longer. You know, there was a big push from people from New York out to the suburbs. But we have actually anecdotally at least seen, you know, clients who are both New York and suburbs who went ahead and said, this is great. I was looking for another apartment and now I'm going to get a great deal. So, I mean, they had this pool of money and now their pool of money, they're able to buy a different apartment and put money into renovation or buy a new one and do it and buy a new one that's more expensive. So, I mean, on the buyer side, you know, they're not dumb and they know that right now they're likely to be able to find better pricing, although it's not guaranteed. And again, I think Roberto has always pointed out that the New York City market turns on a dime and you can feel it turning.
Is COVID discouraging them from taking on major renovation projects in the city because of the scarcity of elevator time, for example?
I don't think so. I think it just changes their expectation of how long it'll take. And if they're able to get if the apartment has been priced appropriately, then they're able to get a deal that they can actually do the construction. If it's been priced inappropriately, like during a frothy market, they don't have the wherewithal to go ahead and put that much more into the apartment, or they don't feel good about it.
I agree. I also think that's changed in the last 2 months. So in the fall, I saw people really be very wary of buying apartments that needed work because I think a lot of people felt that we were going to have another shutdown in the winter and they would be caught. I think the light at the end of the tunnel is here. And I will tell you, I took a friend of mine to go get vaccinated this morning at the Javits Center. And it was an unbelievable experience. I felt so proud to be American. We were in and out in 15 minutes. It was so organized and clean and friendly and amazing. And the National Guard guys and women were amazing and unbelievable. And so I do think in New York, people feel like we're not going to be shut down again. So now they're willing to come look at recs. But again, they want that discount. They want to get something back for taking on the headache.
Without a doubt. Yep.
That's the best value.
If I'm an investor on this call and now I'm all excited that Lisa Lippman is going to sell me a rec or Curtis. So what is your absolute best deal for me right now? I am Mr. Moneybags. I'm coming to the city. Have you got anything that I absolutely have to see that just dropped dead? Because you just told me it's the prettiest apartments in the city in this building, in the Pitti Palace that you said.
The Apthorpe. Come see the Apthorpe. When you come into the city, even if you're not buying, you have to come take a tour of the building. It's like going to a museum and you can live there. And there's a gym and a roof deck and a garage and a driveway where you can drop things off.
Entry point for one of those recs.
Right now, my entry point's $3.5 million, but I've had them there for $2.5 million. It all depends on the size and the floor.
The entrance alone is an experience. It's gorgeous.
It's a fabulous building. I just want to add one thing because I see the time is up, which I wanted to add. I mentioned to Roberto and John and to Lisa, just having been in this business now for a lifetime, just a little bit about wellness, because we're on this treadmill, we're working around the clock. I think it's so important that everyone, and I have a dear friend who I'm looking at now, my friend Karen, who has a yoga practice as well. So for early on, when I started my early 20s and I was working around the clock, and I said, you know what, I really need something to do that is not, to help me not burn out too quickly, which I think you can in this business if you don't pace yourself. So I've had a yoga practice for 35 plus years, and meditation. I get up every day, I do my practice before I start the day. I feel after I get off the mat, okay, I can deal with whatever craziness might be going on in the business. It keep me grounded, keep me centered. You'd have to ask my husband if it's working, but basically, I just recommend it. I mean, I just think it's so important that we have to take care of our health in this business because if you lose that, obviously you're not going to sell any more apartments. So I just really believe in that 100%, and I recommend it. So Lisa, what do you do to keep yourself going at this rate?
I exercise every day. I exercise every day. I don't always do yoga, but I do something to clear my head. And I'm not on my phone while I'm exercising ever. There's 40.
That's true. I used to see her at the gym. That's true.
If there's 45 minutes where you don't get a message back from me, that's my 45 minutes of the day. And you know, if there's an emergency, I might have my phone next to me that I have to, but I really don't. It's my one time. It clears my brain.
Yep.
I wanted to add one thing to Curtis too. I think having friendships in the business, he said that before, having friends in the business, having people to call. John, now you can call me. Having people to say,
call me, like, you call me. John, you call me.
I had a terrible day, or I have this awful client who's harassing me, or I can't believe how I got screwed, or can you help me price something? Just having friends is so super important. And one more thing about a rec, if it has a view, buy it. A view, a view, a view.
Ooh. I wanted to add one thing about what Lisa just said about helping your friends as far as pricing. This is such a difficult market to price. Any broker calls me, I'm there. Lisa is the same. I can call her. She's always there for me. I'm there for her. And it's so important because as experienced as we may be, this is a very tough market to price in. To get that feedback is so valuable and so appreciated.
For sure. And I got to say for Lisa, and John and Curtis, one thing I will say is you people are extremely responsive. If I email you, I'm hearing from you quite quickly with some substantial information, or at least listen, I'll get back to you later. And I think that's extremely valuable. I mean, I've called Lisa, I remember calling you, it was pre-COVID. It was probably a year and a half ago when things were very, very difficult. And you had so many listings. And I said, this is going to be the biggest cross-section of property of someone I can talk to. And I called you and I said, are you busy? And you said, yeah, I'm busy showing because you weren't deals were not happening. You're like, I am showing and showing and showing. Deals are but you were so transparent and honest, and you took my call. And so I really appreciated that.
Yep. We appreciate our friends in this business, really, very much.
I guess what I'm learning, and it's a nice conclusion, is this is a people business. That's what I'm hearing. And you got to take care of yourself, right, Curtis? And then you got to take care of the people around you. And what goes around comes around.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of us, but it's a small community. And, you know, you have to treat everybody with respect, as we heard yesterday. And so, yeah, that's how I try to behave in this business.
I learned a lot in this. I learned a lot in this call. Sitting out here in Connecticut, I think of it as a city of 10 million people and nobody knows anybody. Now that myth has been busted. I thought Lisa Lippman was unapproachable. That myth has totally been busted. She's very approachable, but don't call her during gym time. And that she says that I can buy, Mr. Moneybags here needs to come right into the city right now and buy the prettiest apartment in New York for only $3 million. Okay, I'm in. What else did we learn, Roberto? You want to wrap it up?
I'll leave it to you. What about next week?
What about next week?
Greg
Heim? We have Greg Heim, chief economist And we may have a second economist, right? He suggested that we get the expert from New Jersey. So we're going to ask, maybe we'll get a New Jersey perspective and a New York perspective, 2 economists. How many economists does it take to change a light bulb? You'll have to tune in next week to find out.
Make sure to laugh at Greg Heim's jokes. He doesn't like it if you don't laugh at him.
Curtis, Lisa, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. This was fun.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you,
guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.